A celebration of the music from Coco is now streaming on Disney+, and the show, recorded live at the Hollywood Bowl, features some incredible puppets. I talked to the owner of Pro Puppet Makers, Aaron De La Pena, about his background in puppetry and what it was like bringing the characters of Disney Pixar's Coco to life on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media, and now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that talks to puppeteers about the art and business of puppetry. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Aaron De La Pena, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Hi, Grant. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. I'm happy to have you here. I'm excited to get to talk to you. We've worked on a couple projects together, and we've always had a great time. So I'm actually looking forward to this, to getting to know you even more than I have before. So I'll ask, as I usually do you remember when you first got into puppets?
I do. I think the first puppet show I saw was obviously, like with most people, Sesame Street. Mm-hmm. But the way I really got into puppets, I was little, and my mom had recorded a show for me on HBO, and the show turned out to be Fraggle Rock because it was too early in the morning and I was asleep. And she played a VHS for me, and she said, "Look what I recorded for you." And Fraggle Rock was basically my obsession and got me into puppetry, and it's kind of still is why I wanted to build puppets and why I wanted to perform puppets. So, yeah, it was a really magical show for me.
Well, and when you were that young age, and you said that it got you into building puppets, were you trying to build puppets at a young age, or did you have puppets around?
No, so I had no puppets, and the weird part was I'd watch Sesame Street, and I was hooked on Sesame Street, and I knew there were puppets. I knew what puppets were, but I had no inclination to build puppets or perform puppets. But when I saw Fraggle Rock, I also knew that they look similar. They're Muppets. They look similar to the Sesame Street puppets. But looking at the Fraggles, they were so cool, and since I knew they're puppets, and my parents explained to me what puppets were. I saw the making of Fraggle Rock, a special that aired, and they would actually go into the workshop and show the Henson builders building the Fraggles, and Jim Henson would talk about it and how they built the Fraggles. And after, I remember watching the interview and locking eyes with Jim Henson holding this Fraggle, and I just saw that they were using foam and wanted to know more and demanded books and just try to get all the information I could from that. So yeah, that was probably how I got into building too, and how I wanted to build puppets because I saw that special. So.
Yeah, and in those days, because I think we're roughly the same age, at least, yeah. There wasn't the internet. You couldn't look up a YouTube video on how to build a puppet, and you had to search out these books at the library.
Yeah, so I was in elementary school, and we had a library in our school, and I was a kid that checked out all the puppet books. I'm sure, like anybody else who gets into puppet building, that was our only resource at the time. But I was also kind of I would take these books home, and they are all about how to build rod puppets and marionettes. But I was really irritated because there was no Muppet foam puppet construction methods. And I just wanted to know how to do that. And there really was no resource. And I didn't start learning how to build foam puppets until I was probably in 5th grade. And that was actually, it's a weird story. I wanted to build foam puppets. There was nothing in the books. I ask my parents about it, and my parents really couldn't help me. And they would buy me little hand puppets, from, hand puppets that came with a Christmas candy and a stocking, these little really simple glove puppets. But I put my hand in them, these aren't Fraggles, they don't have foam in them. And I really wanted to know what the stuff was. And one day I was playing in the sofa cushions, and the zipper was unzipped, and I felt the material, and I knew that was foam. So I stole all the foam while my parents were sleeping out of the sofa cushions and started to cut it. And while they were asleep, got into my mom's hot glue gun and started gluing the stuff together, which ended in a trip to the hospital from burning my hands while they were asleep.
Well, now you, from a very young age, as you've just said, you were building puppets and working on puppets and figuring out how they worked, and you built a lot of puppets over the years. But what was it that made you decide to set up Pro Puppet Makers officially as a business?
So, sort of my last stint at Disney, uh, I was there on and off for about 10 years, if you combine my years of service. All those years, we're doing puppetry and working in building puppets and repairing their puppets for them. But sort of my last year there, I had wanted to get serious, and I was reading a lot of books about creating companies, and I just got tired of just like sitting in that green room and knowing I love puppets, and then not being able to. I felt like I was just like I couldn't get my foot in the door somehow, and I just decided, reading these books that maybe if I created a logo, that I think is cool, that is some sort of branding to me, like I didn't put it out there like as like on like a website or anything. I kept this logo just for me. So I would look at this logo in my book when I was in the green room at Disney, and sort of made it like a motivation. Like this could be me. This is my company. It wasn't a real company. Uh, nobody saw this logo. I'd asked 3 different friends to sort of help me assemble this logo, and it went through 3 different versions of it until I got to something that I was proud of. And as soon as the logo was perfect, then I had my name, and I thought about the name a million times. And the name, I was a puppet maker. And I remember there was a website when I was growing up called puppetbuilder.com. I don't know. Do you remember that website, Puppet Builder?
No, I don't.
So puppetbuilder.com, quick side story. I know it's a long version, but puppetbuilder.com was a San Francisco puppeteer who's recently passed away, who was another icon of mine, named Nick Barone. And he used to do library shows in the Bay Area, and build these little hand puppets that were so tiny but so perfect. And I had met him a couple times at some puppet conventions in LA when he'd come down here from the Bay Area. And when I moved up to Northern California, I would see his shows, and he was awesome. But his wife, Rose Sage, and him created. She was doing website design at the time, right when AOL came out. So he was actually one of the first websites to actually be a resource for puppet builders. So he would make a list of where you can buy foam, local resources for foam, materials, some diagrams, and how he made his rod puppets. And at that time too, people were really protective about, that sort of like their methods, their specific methods. And Nick wasn't. And you could talk to Nick at conventions, and he would take you aside and, answer any questions you had. And he was amazing and the nicest guy in the world. And everyone in the Bay Area respected him. And it was really, I took it kind of hard when I learned that he passed away. But anyway, puppetbuilder.com was his website. So I wanted a name that was sort of like a puppet builder, and another, phrase for puppet builder was puppet maker. So I'm like, well, maybe it's something like that. And then I think puppet maker was taken, and I wanted the domain. So I'm like, well, what about professional puppet maker? Pro for short. So I stuck with Pro Puppet Maker. And the branding of Pro Puppet Maker 2 was sort of like in the books that I was reading about creating a company. It was really important to have the word puppet maker in the title, especially for search results. And we're really making it known what that brand is, that it's, just by saying it or seeing it on the internet, that that's a puppet resource. If you want to have a puppet created, it wasn't like something abstract, like as beautiful as the Nike name is, Nike's, iconic, but if you're looking for some shoes, like now, of course, you know the name Nike, but at the time, you didn't know the name Nike. So I wanted it to be searchable, and I wanted people to know what it was immediately. So I came up with the name Pro Puppet Maker, and had my logo set, and got the .com, and got a website going. There was nothing on the website for 2 years, just my logo. So I really pushed myself to fill that website with content, but I really had nothing. Like, I was building puppets for companies, but privately. And I remember I did a TV. I did a TV show, and after I did the TV show, it was one day to build this puppet. It was like Mission Impossible, and it was a puppet for CeeLo Green. It was called Talking to Strangers, and it was on Fuse Network. And they wanted a puppet of CeeLo Green. And a friend of mine at the time had he got the opportunity to puppeteer on the show if he could deliver a puppet of CeeLo Green. So he asked me about it, and I said, yeah, I can do it. I stayed up all night, doing this puppet, and it was Mission Impossible. And I remember at the end, I really had like 2 hours to finish this puppet before we had to drive to LA to deliver this thing. And I remember it was around Halloween time, and I had these foam pumpkins in my little workshop there. And I grabbed the foam pumpkin because CeeLo Green is a rounder guy. And I just remember cutting up the foam pumpkin and using it as his body. And praying that these guys didn't take apart the puppet or take the fleece off of it when I got to set, or I would be fired immediately. But yeah, we showed up to set with this puppet, and CeeLo was there, and I didn't think I was going to get to meet CeeLo, and the producer flipped out over this puppet, like he's never seen a puppet before, and took me in to meet CeeLo. And CeeLo was wearing all white, had 3 people doing his nails, like manicuring his nails before the show. And the whole dressing room was all done in white. Smelled really nice, like expensive lotion. And he's like, CeeLo, this is your puppet. This is Aaron. He built the puppet for you. And CeeLo, really nice. Apparently, he was a huge fan of the Muppets and ended up doing a couple things with the Muppets after that. But saw this puppet and flipped out over it. And to see, this guy, like it's CeeLo Green, he's a huge celebrity, go nuts over this little thing that I made overnight. That I always think my work's, I have a critical eye for everything I make. So I always think it's like, and nothing's good enough. Like I always keep on trying to make it better. But to see him really genuinely be, excited about this was really nice and cool for me. So after that, I went to my dad. My dad's is a corporate attorney, and I was asking him because I always thought it was like all this money and all this red tape to set up a company. And he goes, "No, you just have to file paperwork." And I'm like, "What do you? Is it like a process?" He goes, "It's a process." He goes, "Go online, get the forms, and mail them off." I'm like, "Okay." So I went online, I got the forms, and I started my company, and I got the S corp in California for Pro Puppet Makers. And then after that, it was, something I thought was impossible was actually a reality. So then after that, I started to force myself to work because I now had this company. So yeah, that's how I started it.
You've built a lot of puppets for a lot of different projects over the years, but why I wanted to have you on the show today was to talk about the puppets that you built for a celebration of the music from Coco, which was performed live at the Hollywood Bowl and is on Disney Plus. And these puppets are just fantastic, and I'm going to talk about detail of them, but I would love to know, what was the process of getting this job? Were you approached, or did you have to bid on it?
So yeah, it's a weird, very, very weird story. I was, I'm usually, knock on wood, one of the Southern California builders that's relatively busy. And I remember we were doing a show for we were doing Fox NFL puppets stuff, and we were just in the middle of that, and I was really busy with the shoot for that week before, and also two other projects had come in. One through a producer that remembered me from another project, and the other one was just like a bid inquiry. So I was really busy that week, and I remember just sort of like overwhelmed with things. And I had received an email from somebody talking about the project, but a really vague email saying, we're doing a live show in Southern California. And these emails come in all the time, just like inquiring about prices and stuff like that. And you have to be, you want to answer as many emails as you can, but you also have to be selective on how much attention you give to every email that comes in, because you want to invest your time in projects that develop and not, and projects that you're working on. Anybody you're working with, you want to give your full attention to. So you apply to many things as possible and try to give as much information. So I had replied to this email about this live show, and I received two emails. There's an email and there was a follow-up email. And after the follow-up email, I really felt like, it was still being kind of vague. And I'm like, well, I've given you as much information as I can. Please let me know if you can give me some more information, and then I'll try to be more helpful in your process. Because again, with those emails, you want to help producers and companies as much as possible. Even if you don't get the job, you just want to have a good reputation as somebody who's good to work with. So I wasn't thinking anything other than I was busy that week, and then I really wasn't answering my phone either. And then I received the call 2 days after I had a follow-up email from these guys, and it was from a friend of mine who's another builder in LA, Russ Walco. And I picked up Russ's call, of course, and we were talking, and he mentioned to me that he had received an email. And I said, yes, I received an email too about this. But apparently Russ had talked to somebody involved about it, and I hadn't, because I hadn't followed up on it as much as I'd like to, because I was busy with other stuff. And Russ had mentioned to me that it was a large puppet project, and the last couple of years, I had been working on large scale puppets outside of California for a company out in Utah that was sort of developing stuff with Disney Theatrical out in Utah for the Tucson Center of the Arts. So Russ knew that sort of had some experience with Disney Theatrical out there, and that for the last couple of years I've been building these large puppets. And we talk all the time, and I'd show him these monsters that I was building that were 15 to 30 feet long, and he would just say, I'm a crazy person, why am I doing that? It's too much work. And I would build them like all 80% by myself, because I would just get obsessed with building these things. So anyway, yeah, Russ had told me that they were large scale puppets, and I said, oh, that's up my alley. And Russ said, yeah, when I spoke with them, I said that you were probably the guy to go to, and you should probably call them back. and he had mentioned to me that it might be a Disney Theatrical thing, and I said, oh, okay, well, I'll call them back. So the next day, I replied immediately back to their email, and I arranged to talk to them the following day. So next day I called them, and they were still being vague about the project. And I sort of explained to them, like, well, I understand you have to be vague, and there's confidentiality involved and all that stuff. And they said, well, let us send over some stuff for you to sign. So I signed some stuff, basically saying, like, standard non-disclosure agreements about not talking about it. And I said, yeah, of course, So through our conversation, they said, we're doing the show at the Hollywood Bowl, and we're looking right now to possibly have giant puppets. They didn't know what characters they were yet. So, and it was for the production company that was putting it on. And I said, yeah, I'm interested, and let's talk. And we kept the conversation going for about a week. And then through that week, just through back and forth conversations, I learned that it was at the Hollywood Bowl, but it actually was for Disney concerts. And I said, great. I just assumed it was a Disney concert sponsored event, and that the company was putting it on with Disney concerts. But then after I signed right before I signed all the agreements, I learned that, hey, you know what? It's Disney concerts, and it's Pixar that it's very heavily involved, and so was Disney concerts. They weren't just sponsoring it; they were very involved in the event, and this is the first time they'd ever done Coco in a live setting like this, and so that was huge. And then I learned that the puppets that they wanted created were one of the biggest characters size-wise in the movie, which was Pepita, and I was like, wow, that's massive. And then after I signed contracts, I learned about how big they wanted to create this puppet, and then they added a couple more characters, and I was happy to do that, and it just sort of went from there.
How much lead time did you have to build the puppets?
That's a fun fact too. So when we agreed to do it, we knew we wouldn't have a lot of time, and we sort of knew that. And in early discussions, it came up that we know we don't have a lot of time to build this. B, realistically, what is the minimum amount of time we need? 3, how can we build this, material wise and labor wise, to keep it as close to the character likeness as possible, because we knew that's what Pixar wanted and that's what Disney wanted. Yeah, that's what we wanted too. And also these have to be lightweight, and it has to be within budget. So we had a time frame. I think we had like maybe started off with maybe 40 days to build these puppets. And then in the end, the actual build time was we ended up building 3 puppets. It was the monkey, Pepita, and then Dante. And in the end, fabrication time, we had about a week a puppet. So it's 3 weeks to fabricate these puppets out of foam, get them finished, load them on a truck, and then get them over to the Hollywood Bowl. And for someone, if you're not familiar with puppet building, it's like anywhere from like 80 to 120 hours of labor to build a small foam puppet style hand puppet. And that's why, people ask why puppets are so expensive. And my answer is, well, you're paying for materials, but you're also paying for the tedious labor and man hours that it takes to create a puppet. So imagine that on, a much larger scale where Pepita's 30 feet long, and the foam you're using does not want to stay in shapes and wants to do whatever it wants to do and pull away from you and come unglued, and you're working against everything at that point. So it was about a week of puppet, and it really was a mission impossible. But I've done stuff like that before when I was I'm really good at deadlines and doing stuff without sleep. And that's why another reason people think that I'm a lunatic, because I'll stay up for 4 days and just keep going because I need to. It's just the way my mind works. I need to get stuff done, and when I'm into a project, I just need to keep going. So yeah, it was a week of puppet, and we had agreed to send off they'd asked for a proof of concept. So we did all the drawings of how we thought these puppets would operate. And then from there, we went to 2 tours of the Hollywood Bowl where we'd walk the path with all the bodies involved, the producers, and we met the director Felipe, and he talked to us about his vision of the show, and we got a tour of the bowl and tried to figure out how limited the space was on the wings of the bowl, and we really didn't have places to store them. The puppets would have to compress and then go to full scale when they weren't being stored, and where they're going to come in, and how many performers we had on them. So, and that was great. And I'm like, this is, it's so nice. We have all this information, and this usually doesn't happen. And, I was really grateful for it. And then right before the build starts, all the information changed, because this is the first time they're doing the show. And then they decided it was amazing. This is going to be at the Hollywood Bowl. And I was just, you're at the Hollywood Bowl with puppets, and it's a dream come true. And it's Coco, I'm Hispanic, and I'm obsessed with Disney and Pixar, and this is like a dream come true for me. And so all that was just enough for me to be on cloud 9, and that I got selected to do this project, and dream come true. So right before that starts, they throw in that nice little wrench into the project that Disney decided that they want to film it for Disney Plus. So everything changed because some of the performers had to be now SAG. So we lost bodies that we had, and then all the performers just really got changed up because they're filming for Disney Plus, and they needed union and non-union people to work on it. And I was just sort of, I was busy in the build process. I'm like, okay, cool. Do we still have the same amount of people? And they're like, well, yeah, sort of. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Great. I need to get back to gluing foam. So when the SAG thing happened, I was fine with it, but we wanted to make Pepita a certain size, and I wanted to do it within budget. So I think we had her smaller, way smaller, maybe like half the size as what she ended up being. But we did that because at the time, Pixar had worked with the company to design inflatables of Dante and the monkey characters. So those were going to be inflatables, and they were no longer puppets. So those would inflate on a scale on the side of the stage, and then Pepita would be part of the live parade that would walk through the audience. So I'm like, oh, great, she can be smaller, and fantastic. So I really wasn't worried about the time of the build, and I only had to build Pepita. And then at some point, we realized that the production company realized that the inflatables would take up too much real estate on the stage, and I agreed with them. They were, the Hollywood Bowl, the stage is not that big. It's really deceptive. It's smaller than what people think it's going to be for storage space and for staging. And the inflatables would be through my conversations with the production designer and the production company, that they would take up too much real estate. So I'm like, okay, well, great. Then we'll do Pepita. And then it sort of came back, like, what if we created Dante and the monkey as puppets and added it to the parade with Pepita? And I was sort of hesitant. I'm like, we really don't have a lot of time to do this. And I really just wanted it to happen. I thought, that would be really cool. And the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. And I went back to the production designer and the production company, and I said, what? Really, if we're creating these characters now as puppets, and we need them to be visible because they're going to be seen in a live theater and on camera at the Hollywood Bowl and being filmed for Disney Plus, they really should not be the same size as Pepita. And if we wanted them all scaled uh, in proportion to each other, we can't make them any smaller than this size because you would lose the visibility of them. So Dante had to be a certain size, and the monkey was the smallest. So the monkey had to be at least a certain size. And by upsizing all those so they're at scale with each other, that turned out that Pepita had to be 30 feet. And I knew that. And I, I wanted to service the production, and I wanted it to look incredible. So we agreed that, she would be huge. And the projection that I had for the build time got inflated by double. So we had even less time. So that started the build process, and then I got really nervous about it. And we were waiting on a lot of green lights, because with a process like that, you can't just, as much as you want, I've worked with Disney theatrical before, twice before this project. And I worked with DreamWorks, making live puppets of their animated characters. And over the years, I've learned about the process of licensing and the importance of branding, and how serious you need to take this process, because these aren't your characters. These are characters that a huge team of people worked on for years of their life, went into designing these characters and getting the likeness right and creating these movies. And this character has to look like the same character no matter where it is, in a theme park, in a live show, as a stuffed animal, on a television screen. It has to be the same character, so that anybody that sees that character, including a kid that's going to see a live show, knows that that's that character. So I've experienced with that process, and I knew it wouldn't be as easy as, well, we're going to build Pepita. Here's a picture of Pepita. Go do it. And I was ready for the process to start. So I really just couldn't start go designing patterns and cutting foam, So you had to wait for a lot of hands and a lot of okays before you started that process. And I tried to do as much as possible waiting on that process. We did. We got drawings approved before we the first thing, and then after that we got patterns approved, and more or less the function of the puppets. So we had started building the Pepita body, and just foam. We had laid out the foam patterns for a quarter scale mock-up, and then try to figure out how it's going to be assembled and how it's going to be, a three-dimensional object. And I was building it, and I would send pictures in and just update them on the process. And I remember I had a stomach built and part of Pepita's head. And this is only 4 days into the build process. So we were moving fast and trying to do as much as possible. And then I remember we had an email come in, and it was from, I remember it said Pixar. And I'm like, Pixar? And I checked my email box, and it was from Pixar. And they said, we saw the pictures, and we want to arrange for a meeting. We want to fly one of our sculptors down to meet with you and to check in on the process and to give notes. And I remember I stared at this email for about an hour, just spacing out. Are they serious? One, that it's actually coming from Pixar, and then two, that they're going to fly someone down here to my workshop to, look at this puppet with me. And I was just staring at this half assembled head and a stomach. And I called the Pixar the next day, and I said, yeah, I really don't think it's far along enough to give any feedback. And they're like, no, we're sure it's okay. We just want to be as much involved in this process early on as possible. And I said, yes, I understand that, but I seriously, we only been building for 3 or 4 days, and we have a head and a stomach. and they were just like really kind and really nice, and like, okay, well, when can you meet? So I'm like, well, next week. Let me get a little more done. So Disney, we were talking to Disney and the down here, and we arranged to do a meeting with uh, the production company we were working with down here, and Pixar. And I really didn't understand, like they said they were sending a sculptor. I didn't know if it was like a clay sculptor, or like a 3D sculptor. Like I really didn't know. If they are a puppet builder, no idea. So we set an appointment to meet the following week, and I get a knock on my door, and it's this really tall guy with a gray beard and thick glasses, and really deep, soft voice, really soft spoken. And he says, "Hey, are you Aaron?" I'm like, "Hey, yeah, hey, nice to meet you." I'm like, "Are you here for the meeting?" He said, "Yeah, I'm here to look at your workshop." He goes, My name's Jerome. I'm from Pixar." I'm like, "Okay, come in." So he comes in, and then the Disney people showed up and met him right after he did, and came in, and we were doing the tour. And I had two people working in the workshop, and I remember opening the door, and he came into the workshop, and he stares at this thing on the table, and just like walks around it, and I'm like, I'm gonna get fired. And it's like horrified. And he goes, and the only thing he says to me, he looks at me, he says, "So what is it that I'm looking at?" And I died. I wanted to vomit. And I said, "It's Pepito's body." And he said, "Okay." And he starts nodding his head. And then he gets out his iPad and his cell phone. And I'm like, I bet you he's calling Pixar right now and saying this guy needs to be fired. We're in trouble. And he takes a note on his iPad and then takes a picture of what he's seeing, and hands me like these 3D models. They're printouts of the 3D model of Pepito from Pixar, and he starts holding it to the side of it, and he tells me, "I see it." He goes, "It's getting along." He goes, "Wow." He goes, "I really I'm blown away by the pattern lines." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I guess I'm not going to get fired right now because that's positive stuff." And he's looking around, and then the next thing he says is really quiet. It's like awkward silence, and the next thing he mentions is, "So how long do you have to actually build these?" And I said, "Like under 3 weeks at this point." And he just nods his head, and he looks at me again. He goes, "Why do you only have 3 weeks to build these?" And he goes, like, what happened? Who sat on this? And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I have 3 weeks." And he goes, "Okay." He goes, "You should have like 3 months at least for one of these." And I said, "I know. This is what I do for a living." And really nice guy. And he starts laughing. And he goes, "How are you doing this? Are you sleeping?" Like really concerned for my well-being. And and I said, "No, I haven't been sleeping, and but it's gonna get done." And he goes, "No, I believe you. I believe you." He goes, "But that's a big ask." I said, "I know, but we have the date of the show is not moving." And like I said, his name is Jerome Raft, and we start talking, and really weird. Like he's from Northern California, which I used to live in Northern California after I moved out of Southern California. And he starts telling me that he's what he did, and one of his first jobs out of college was working on Nightmare Before Christmas as a sculptor. And his brother used to work for Disney as an animator, and that's how he found his way into Pixar, and he's been there ever since. And starts telling me that, like, the amazing projects that he's done for Pixar, and in 2 minutes, this guy just became like, a huge celebrity and like the nicest man in the world, because he sort of knew what I was going through, because he's used to it too. Um, but so for someone who was intimidating, that's coming from Pixar, this iconic company, that I thought I was going to get fired because I just felt the weight of the world was on my shoulders to get these done. He really became a really another artist, a supportive artist to lean on for if when I did get tired, or when I felt like I needed additional resources or materials, and not be intimidated to ask him any questions that I needed, and gave me his cell phone number and all the context I needed at Pixar. He sort of pulled in for me. So that became incredible and invaluable experience. But the weird part was, he grew up in Southern California as well, and I didn't know that. And we ended up like having the same sculpting teacher in junior college at different times, because he was older than I am, and I remember I had only taken that sculpture class in junior college in Fullerton for like a couple months, and we had the same teacher, and it was such a weird coincidence. And that's how sort of we started the dialogue, before he told me, like, that he worked on Nightmare Before Christmas, which is, a huge inspiration of mine. I'm sure with anybody, but he was a great person to know and meet, and one of the kindest artists, supportive artists I've met in the limited time that I got to spend with him. And I've been in situations too where with big companies like that, when you're dealing with a licensed product, it's really easy for someone to point a finger and sort of throw anybody they can under the bus to make themselves look better, or to get the stress off of them. And it usually is the guy on the bottom of the totem pole. It's and in my personal experience, it usually is, the person who doesn't have the bigger voice, which is the person that's not working in the company. It's the outside contractor, which is usually a vendor or an artist, that gets the pushback, and they have to make everything. They have to correct that mistake, to make everybody else happy. When even if you give the explanation of like, hey, well, this is the first time I've seen this drawing, and I've been through all that before. And that really happened a lot with the DreamWorks project too. So I was really expecting that. I was prepared for that, for the pushback, and to defend myself if there was pushback, but there really wasn't. Everyone was sort of on the same page, and this is we know how much time we have. It's Mission Impossible, and they were happy with how it was going so far, which was really great.
Were there any nerves performing at the Hollywood Bowl, or was this just another gig when the show went down?
We did 2 rehearsals at the Hollywood Bowl with the puppet. And we showed up there, and we did the parade route that we had staged. And we measured everything and did 2 different versions of how the puppet would enter and where it would be stored. And through that process, we started off with Pepita being able to be compressed and then expand when she came out of the storage wing into full size, to clear storage areas, and also to clear the audience that was sitting underneath the puppet. And then when the puppet would get to the stage, Pepita's wingspan also had to clear poles that were already in place at the Hollywood Bowl. So we were really restricted on, we wanted to make the puppet the scale it should be for the audience, and for the staging, and it would service everything in production to make it as big as possible. But we were limited on restrictions of the bowl itself. So we made it scale, and we measured everything. And then we did 2 rehearsals of the Hollywood Bowl with the cast. And in that rehearsal process, we learned that, one, this puppet is taller, and it really needs to be fully extended. Like the puppeteers need to fully extend this thing to get it to clear the audience underneath that were sitting down at the tables at the Hollywood Bowl. And then two, the wingspan that it would have, because the wings weren't on at this point, would need to clear the corners and around the poles that were on the railing of the Hollywood Bowl, because it would come in through the side, walk through the audience, and then go in front of the stage, and then go back up and then exit. So that made me really nervous. And now I was basically, instead of saying, here's your puppet, and being there to assist everybody, it was now I was on the puppet. And I was responsible to deliver everything that I said it could deliver. Like, yeah, I can clear this. Yes, we can make this happen. And now I actually had to make sure that happened for all the performers, and I was there and held accountable. So that made me really nervous, and I knew how big the wings were, and also this puppet was probably one of the lightest puppets for the scale it was. Every measure was taken to make this puppet as light as possible, because being a puppeteer, that's one of the benefits I have from being a puppeteer and a puppet builder, is that weight is not your friend when you're a puppeteer, and especially when you have dancers that are that don't really have they're trained to be dancers. They don't have the muscle to hold up a giant puppet, and that was another reason why they wanted to put me on the puppet, to sort of help them support and balance the puppet weight wise. So we did the rehearsal, and I was just really nervous about the whole thing, and really I wanted the dancers to feel comfortable, and I wanted everyone to be happy with this thing. And Felipe saw the rehearsal and was very, very excited and couldn't believe that this puppet was here, and that made me excited. But in the back of my mind, I was still thinking, Pepita does not have the wings on yet, and I knew what they were, and I knew how large they were, and I was very vocal about that to everybody else involved too, and they were just very supportive and like, okay, yeah, we trust you. And I'm like, well, it still has to happen. We have to make it happen. So we did the rehearsal. It's fine. And then the second rehearsal, we show up for the Hollywood Bowl, and Pepita now has wings on. And Disney Plus was now part of the second rehearsal, and they had set up all their camera towers that were not there for all the run-throughs that we did. They were in the middle of walkways. They had very tall cameras that were in place that you could not move, that where everything on every corner would be in the way of the wingspan, and they could not be moved. They were set up. They needed these to film the show. And I was sort of like, why didn't we know? And there was a lot of people who, a lot of different conversations going on. So it turned out from me being very comfortable to me being, oh my, how's this going to happen? It can't clear that corner anymore, and we have to change paths, and the wings are way too long. It's going to hit the camera. And it just made me really nervous really fast. So on top of performing this puppet, live in front of all these people, which is, a sold out show, to being filmed on Disney Plus on top of that, the pressure was on performance wise. And we really just only had the first day of the show was really like a tech rehearsal for the puppet fully assembled. So it was really there for everything to fail at that point, because we really didn't see the puppet run with full wingspan with these cameras in place until we actually did it. And I was sweating bullets, and on top of that, trying to support the weight And I remember all the dancers that were on Pepita with me and on Dante and the monkey just went from being really confident to, when it was really go time, to them getting really nervous because they wanted to look great, and they wanted to look like an awesome puppet. And and that made me really nervous. I'm like, everybody was confident. What happened? So I was really nervous about it. Like, I don't want to crash into a camera in front of a full, like a sold out house and have the whole show stop because this puppet breaks in the middle of the show. And also, there's nowhere to go. If the puppet breaks or hits something, this thing's gonna, Pepita is gonna fall down, and either I have to support the weight, or it's gonna hit the stage, or fall on top of people like like a Thanksgiving Day parade float being deflated, or so everything was in my mind, and I was super nervous and trying to hold on to this pole and also give a good performance, and also directing all the dancers that are with me on the puppet, because it's a team effort for that puppet. So I was calling cues, every step of the way, and also taking into consideration that this puppet is being held above us, but because of the poles and the audience, you really can't see what's in front of you on the parade route. So trying to look around the poles and look around the other performers that are in front of you to make sure the path is clear, and to make sure the wingspan is clearing the cameras and the corners. So if it gets stuck, you're going to break the puppet, or you're going to stop the show, and do performance on top of that. So we went down the parade route, and I called the first cue, and everybody lifted when I said lift, and went back down when I called down. And you've seen all these kids' faces as you're walking in front of them, and they're like mouths open, huge eyes, like that is their character. That is Pepita from Coco, and it's there, and it's an amazing experience, and I can't explain in words the feeling that I had, seeing kids look at their character from the movie, and selling that to them that's that character, and it's there in front of them. It was unreal. So seeing that, and still being nervous for everybody, and then I called up, everybody went, and then the nerves started to settle, and I thought we were doing okay, and then the first corner we went around, the wing got stuck, and everybody started to panic. Like the stage managers saw that it was stuck in a tree on the corner, and I was just looking at it, trying to calm everybody down, and I ended up like pulling all the weight by myself, like physically pushing up the weight on this puppet to get it out of the tree before the puppet broke. Because this is night one, mind you, too. So we had to do this again. And we got it out of the tree, and then everybody calmed down and sort of started breathing again. I'm like, we just have to make it up the path, and we're good. And then we got it in front of the stage, and as we're crossing the stage, somebody had kicked over, like one of the guests, a metal table from their little the lower bowl seats, the booths that they have there, in the middle of the route. So I just remember walking this puppet, and then just feeling like a metal object just hit my shin, and everybody was tripping forward, and it was like a domino effect, and just seeing the puppet like almost falling, and I looked down and just planted my feet again, and saw that there was a full-on table in the parade route. And I'm like, oh great. So that was it. That was the second thing. But after that, it was fine, and we made it, and I was physically done by the time we got to the route, but it worked, and we got to work, and it looked good.
Well, I am super excited to see it on Disney Plus. Definitely, I'll be watching only for the puppets. I mean, I'm sure the whole show is fantastic. But I've seen pictures online of these two puppets, mainly Dante and Pepita, and they're just fantastic. They look awesome, and
thank you.
Super excited to see them. If folks want to learn more about your work and Pro Puppet Makers, where can they go?
If they want to learn more about my work, you can go to my website. Of course, it's www.propuppetmakers.com. And also, I'm sort of getting into the Instagram thing right now. So you can find me on Instagram under Pro Puppet Makers and follow me and like my stuff and keep in track of what I'm doing.
There you go. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Grant. It's so great to talk to you again, Grant. And like always, I look forward to the next time we get to meet and work together.
Me too. Me too, for sure. Many thanks to Aaron De La Pena for being on the show. For links to Pro Puppet Makers and some of the other things we talked about, check out the show notes for this episode number 42, over at underthepuppet.com. And if you'd like to hear even more of my interview with Aaron, including his stories of visiting the Henson Mansion in New York and the Creature Shop in London, both at the invitation of Cheryl Henson, look for the bonus content attached to this episode in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. Well, that's going to do it for this special episode of Under the Puppet. If you have any feedback, you can send it via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching for Under the Puppet. And please, tell a friend about the show. That's going to do it for this time. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet featured music by Dan Ring and was edited by Steven Staver. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons get new episodes before they are released, behind-the-scenes information, and exclusive bonus episodes. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2020 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Bachogo executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. The new Under the Puppet app is here for iOS and Android, and it is absolutely free. Download it today to get all the episodes of Under the Puppet in one place. Plus, you'll hear new episodes before their release, get exclusive bonus episodes, and more. Just search for Under the Puppet in the Apple App Store for iOS or on Google Play. You can also visit SaturdayMorningMedia.com/apps for direct links. The free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. Download it today. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.